Welcome to today's edition of The Public Square. I'm Alan C. Duncan, producer of the program, and I'm here with Dave Zanotti, Rob Walgate, and Melanie Elsey. It's going to be a lively show today, I suspect, but Dave, did we figure out what we're going to call this episode yet?
This is one of those shows that we're going to struggle to come up with the right title for. You can feel it, because the subject is No Kings. And this is new terminology. And so what we're going to want to ask everybody to do right from the start is pick up your phone, get to your, if you're on our phone app, the phone app will continue to run while you work your phone, and whatever device that you're on, go to No King's website. Do this with us. And it's simple. They've got a really good domain name, nokings.com. And let's go to their website and let's all look together. Now, at the time that we're looking at this together, because many people this will be a show that is pre-recorded, people will get later. We don't know if they'll change their site.
We don't. And I guess my question would be, as someone on our team, I know all of us have looked for domain names. We know it's not the easiest thing because so many are taken. The question is, wonder what they paid for that, because I don't imagine that was available on the GoDaddy $9.95 plan. Someone probably had it, and they had to make stroke a little check to make sure they got what they wanted.
Don't know, but let's look at their website, and we're walking through this together as to what is this. First responsibility of leadership, Max Dupree says, is that you have to define reality. And reality is basically, what is this? So what is No Kings? And we've seen now that they are, and the question is, people are instantly going to say, oh, no. All these people want is attention. By you talking about them, what you're actually doing is giving them more attention, so you're empowering them. I get that. But let's face it, they're all across every media platform. They've had their first series of protests, and now they're doing their debriefing strategic phone call. And now they're promising us that they're here for more. So let's go to the classroom on this together. Let's learn about this. So let's go to No Kings. The first thing I want to ask you is, what about their logo? It's pretty good, isn't it?
It is good. No, it is good. They've spent time doing it.
Dunk, their logo.
I do like, it's got a bit of, it's like a marker, or maybe it's graffiti. It certainly has an on the street kind of a vibe to it. It's pretty snappy.
Colors are good, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. They've done a good blend on colors. Why is it that everybody loves the iVoters.com blue and orange mix of colors in websites? Because they've got some of that there.
Yeah, well, blue and orange, they're opposite on the color wheel, so
Okay.
they just always pair nice together. Blue and orange is always good together.
I didn't even know that when we picked them. I just thought I didn't know any of that. We need more artists in this.
It was
room,
intuitive.
so.
It was instinctual. You just knew it in your heart.
So there it was.
Well, and they have a cool logo, because it does look like if it was something on a shirt, you'd be like, you wouldn't know what it means,
Right.
but you'd like the logo.
So just a question now. Is it an X that's through? Yes, the X that's through there. Okay,
It's an X through what's in essence a three-pointed crown.
Okay, so is there just a smidge of sacredness in the midst of that graffiti? Because the Kings is an elevated situation, and No Kings. So we've got a historical context of the American experience. We've got those passages in the New Testament. No king but Caesar. It's interesting. They're kind of in an interesting place in your head. They're kind of in the memory zone, like you've heard this before.
They are, but they're also making a statement that I would say, when you say no kings, we don't want a king, the majority of Americans are going to agree with that statement. So they took a kind of an easy slogan, if you will. I mean, because when you hear it and you don't, and I know that's why we're doing this show, to go into the classroom to, in essence, give the scouting report.
Yeah.
To let people know what is behind that. When you hear it, like No Kings, you'd be like, yeah, we don't want a king.
So there's a clear desire to hit into a taproot of American mentality here that goes back to history, that goes back to core principles, that goes back to American memories, that goes back to what you may have seen as a child in a movie or a play, or heard in a textbook, or heard in a classroom. They're trying to claim, if you will, a moral platform
They're even touching a little bit on patriotism, if you think about it.
Okay.
Because where we have come from was a breaking away from an unjust monarchy.
Excellent point. So let's talk about that. Was the American War for Independence the desire to destroy, to go to war against Great Britain and defeat Great Britain and conquer Great Britain?
Not at all.
No, not to conquer.
Was it to change the British system?
It was not to change it was to change the British system in its relationship to the colonies.
So that's a war for independence.
They submitted
It's not a war of
grievances.
rebellion.
Correct.
Yeah.
They submitted grievances even through the Declaration of Independence. There were more than 20 or 25 very specific grievances that were outlined in the Declaration of Independence.
And there were constant entreaties for years preceding the signing of the Declaration in which they tried to make the case that it was no taxation without representation. They were asking for colonial seats at the table to be able to determine the outcome of their own incomes and their own income structure. And colonial Great Britain, the king and the parliament together, refused to give them that standing. And so they felt that as British citizens, they were being deprived of their basic civil rights. They were fundamentally second-class people.
Well, just a couple of other examples on what their grievances were, though, because I'm reading from the Declaration, imposing taxes on us without our consent was what we were just discussing, cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, depriving us, in many cases, of the benefits of a trial by jury. I mean, there were very basic,
serious civil rights
violations that were truthful, that were actually happening. If you look at the No Kings website, their grievances aren't even factually true. Well, they're saying they've deported Americans. They're not deporting Americans. They're deporting lawfully through the process of deportation outlined in law passed by elected representation. They're deporting people who have removal orders, who have overstayed their legal status. All kinds of
people who came here breaking the law to come here.
And they're initially really honing in on the individuals who came here breaking the law to get in and committed heinous crimes once they were here. So,
okay, and that's all summarized in the miscommunication of
the false claims of deporting Americans, disappearing people off the streets. They're describing agents who were removing illegal immigrants as being hiding their faces, masks and hoods and all this stuff. Those agents have to do that because the pro-illegal immigrant status folks want to dox them and expose where they and their families live. So
the cartels.
And the cartels are vengeful.
Whether it's the human trafficking cartels or the drug cartels.
And the other complaint they have in terms of the illegals is they're slashing their services. We don't owe services to people who are here illegally. So these grievances that they're outlining aren't even legitimate if you're comparing it to the grievances of the colonial period that were waged against the monarchy.
Well, and this is to your earlier point, DZ, about Americans weren't trying to overthrow the British government. Even as late as July 5th, 1775, we think about the Olive Branch petition. They were expressing loyalty to the British government, to the crown, even at that point, and still trying to come to some sort of an agreed-upon seat at the table and a redress of these grievances. They did not want to overthrow Great Britain, even as late as 1775.
And when they won the war for independence, they started the country that they applied for in all of those communications and left Great Britain alone.
Yeah, there's still a king there.
Yes, there's still a king there, and there's still a parliament there. All right. So the question is, now we come to what is it we want to get to the who they are, and now what is it that they want? So they've got these grievances, and what they're basically claiming is that the authoritarian form of government that America is now in the midst of which is also very much open to debate, is in essence threatening to make American democracy extinct. So right away, we see the same language that came up in the shadow campaign to save democracy in 2020. All that language is back there again. The current regime. Now, I'm sure that extends well past the President of the United States to the Republican leadership of Congress and the Republican majority in the Senate. So in essence, there is a regime that is attempting to destroy America from within. Now, they claim it's the authoritarian leadership, which they would attribute to the Republican regime. Understanding for our listeners, we are not a Republican organization or a Democrat organization. We see those two organizations in their existence and in their internal endless fight as actually creating platforms for problems just like this one. All right, and we understand that if we read the Declaration correctly, understand the founders correctly, read the evidence as it was, that America began without political parties because getting the main thing to stay the main thing was so important that they didn't have time to divide and try to conquer one another. They needed each other. So it's a different realm. But they're claiming it is the current party in power, people in power, who are trying to destroy American democracy. So they, in essence, are presenting themselves as a method of salvation.
We have to always keep in mind that a democracy is not what our forefathers and the founding fathers set up. What they're trying, in essence, to destroy is the constitutional republic. They want to replace it, actually, with a democracy.
Okay, that's a bell ringer that causes a pause. I'm going to ask you to say that a second time before we go to break.
It looks like from their actions and their wording that they are not interested in having a constitutional republic. So when they're saying we're trying to save democracy, what they're actually trying to do is replace our existing constitutional republic with their version of a democracy.
Well, we're just getting started. We've got plenty more to talk about on today's edition of The Public Square, so please stay with us. We'll be right back for more.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
The conversation today is on No Kings and what we've just experienced, what we are about to experience, and what if No Kings continues forward with their agenda. What they have planned for us. It would be interesting to try to figure out how much money has already been spent on the ground. We've been involved in public policy for a long time. We've done some public events, quite a few, to bring this number of people out and in multiple cities is no small task. What's been built in what seems to be very quickly is significant and very expensive. So I think it's fair to ask the question, who are the people that are leading No Kings? And again, if you go to their website, nokings.com, you can study along right with us. This is an open classroom. Melanie, Rob, what do you see?
Well, Ezra Levin, who is a part of the No Kings leadership, he is the co-founder of the group Indivisible. So do you remember that group from a few years ago? His wife is also co-founder, and she is Leah Greenberg. They are millennials who, both of them are former congressional staffers who left the Washington, D.C. office roles that they played and began working for nonprofits immediately after. So for the past few years, they consider themselves to be grassroots activists.
So we're very quickly in the functional reality of what's been happening for the last 25 years maybe, as the George Soros and the billionaires clubs that are out there that have established have hollowed out the Democrat Party and have instead replaced it with lots and lots of make-believe websites, sort of illusionary organizations, and poured in lots and lots of money into different groups and affinity organizations. And all of this isn't mystical or make-believe. No, it is real. But they amplify themselves with all kinds of NGO tricks and techniques to look real big and real representative. But basically it's being funded by the Progressive Socialist Party, which is fundamentally a synonym now for the Democrats.
Right. And I actually think conceptually No Kings as an organization is conceptually a spinoff of Indivisible. So Indivisible was active during President Trump's first term. So now they just conceptually putting a new package. You know how we always say you have to look inside the box? It's the wrapping paper that they change. So they've changed the wrapping paper and put on a No Kings wrapping paper.
It's really important because we're going to read a quote from this website that's critical in just a moment. But remember, if it comes from Indivisible, then the idea would be to not divide people, but to unite them. And in a second, we're going to read something that sort of says, really?
Well, there are a lot of organizations listed under partners. There are lots of them. People should pull it up and
how many? Melanie, you had the number, right?
209 partner organizations are listed under their link entitled Partners.
209.
With some very interesting names.
There are, well, and I'm noticing that there are some organizations listed here that I think would actually be at cross purposes if they really got down to it. I see a Catholic organization in here, and then I see another organization called Faithful America that's ostensibly saying that it's a Christian organization. And then I also see a Freedom From Religion Foundation. So I'm imagining that at some point,
the ACLU is in there also.
ACLU is in there. At some point, they're going to come to cross purposes. So this is kind of strange bedfellows on this list here.
There's several major labor unions, SEIU.
SEIU,
Right.
Federation of Teachers, Patriotic Millionaires. That's one of the organizations that they list there.
It's lots of fellow travelers. It is not so that people would not. If you're not on the website, go nokings.com. Take a look. You will not see anything that would be remotely considered broad-based or across parties. Or
Planned Parenthood's on there.
This
Human
is
Rights Campaign.
This is the wayfaring travelers of the left that so they all got the memo. And my guess is usually with the memo comes the check or the promise of. But what we're really seeing now is the traction coming forward. We're seeing, in essence, their plan for 2026 and 2028. This is their plan. And you say, okay, well, what evidence do you have of that? Well, first off, you look at the people, you look at the players, you look at the money, and you recognize that the people that make these kinds of very intentional actions are about changing the power structure. They've already said they want to defeat the authoritarian power structure, which means they want the power. All right, they're not saying, let's defeat the authoritarian and let's give it to some neutral body. No, that's not going to happen.
Well, and that's the thing. This doesn't look to me or to any of us like a true grassroots organization. You know, it's funded by everybody.
Very well said. It's pros. It's professionals.
Sure. Well, and then a couple of these other groups jumped out to me on the partners. Federal Workers Against Doge. That's one of the groups. Which that has to be a new group, I would imagine.
Right.
Well, and that's a group that knows that. I mean, their jobs may be at risk if that's determined to be excess spending.
So you think that those Federal Workers Against Doge have all put in money into a pot and said, we're going to create an organization to defend our jobs?
Maybe.
Listen, if you know what the cost of living is in Maryland and Virginia and you're a federal worker, I'm not guessing you've got a couple of million to start a new organization up. So right there, it's got to come from somewhere.
Well, that just made me think this organization might theoretically be against kings, but they certainly are for bureaucracy. And so to me, I would take a good king over a bad bureaucracy any day. And I'm not saying Trump is the good king. I'm just saying in the vacuum, do you want a good king or a bad bureaucracy if you had to pick?
That's a fascinating philosophical question for which we'll take serious criticism, I might add, but it doesn't devalue the power of the question.
Well, and I'd take a republic over any of them. So.
Over any of them.
Yeah.
Right. Which is actually what we have, if I'm not mistaken, because
we already
these
have
folks
it. Okay.
actually are. What was that quote you said about these are Americans who are out protesting in the streets about not having freedom to protest?
Oh, yeah. They're protesting by exercising their right to protest. And that's what I found interesting. I was visiting family over Father's Day weekend, and the local news station, not a large media market, but the local news station, they had a No Kings rally in this city, and they interviewed the guy. And I was waiting for some big, stump speech, and all he kept saying is, we're going to exercise our right to protest because, and I'm like, well, like they never
what
got
you're doing, right?
Yeah, and I'm like, well, that's
Congrats.
good. Yeah, no one was there. They were on the sidewalks. They were doing their thing. No one was arresting them. They had every right to do it. No one was trying to prevent them from doing it. It was like people drove by on their way to work and maybe waved.
And ironically, they were doing that at the same time the United States military was having a parade in honor of the 250th anniversary of the United States Army, whose history has been for people to lay down their lives so that these people would have the ability to protest without fear of being incarcerated for expressing their opinion on the streets. In other words, those of us who disagree significantly with No Kings would still lay down our lives for them to have the right to go there and protest. God bless the American Republic, but they don't like the American Republic. They want something else.
Well, in full disclosure, I know people who were at a No Kings rally, and I also know people who were at the parade, the military parade as well. And so that's part of, like you said, that's part of living in a free republic. You could go to either one of the events.
Now, we're not saying that they're morally equivalent.
No, they just happened in proximity to one another in terms of time.
What is universal is the right to free speech, the right to assembly, right? The right to protest and to bring grievances against civil government. You'll find all of those things in the United States Constitution, which founds this republic, and the Declaration of Independence, which is its best friend in documentation, all right, as John Quincy Adams would describe it. All right, so let's go back to the website. Let's go back to No Kings, because if you're all following along with us on this, you're probably by now seeing this statement. Quote, as ICE raids escalate and Trump doubles down on authoritarian tactics, including politicizing the military, we're meeting the moment with action. The road ahead isn't just about one protest or one day. It's about building a movement powerful enough to win against authoritarian forces dead set on destroying our democracy. Now watch this. We're inspired by the 3.5% principle. It only takes 3.5% of the population engaging in sustained, strategic protest against authoritarianism to achieve significant political change. Everything we do from here on out is grounded in three core commitments: staying in the fight, taking concrete action today, and investing in the long term. Let me restate. We're inspired by the 3.5% principle. In what document does that principle come forward? Where did that principle come from?
Yeah, we're going to try to answer that question when we come back, so you don't want to miss it. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back for more on the Public Square. See you soon.
We will be right back for more on the Public Square.
If you're a regular listener to the Public Square, you've heard of the release of the new book, Jesus, His Story. The response has been remarkable. Why the excitement? This is a sample of what readers are saying. Arranging the four Gospels into chronological order put the life of Jesus into perspective. Thank you. One told us, after reading Jesus' story, I knew this would make a great graduation gift for my nephew. Another said, I got my copy of Jesus' story and read it over the weekend. I want to order 6 more. Can't wait to give them to my friends and family. Interested? You can call us at 1-800-522-8683 or order online. Take a fresh look at the greatest story ever told, Jesus, His Story, at thepublicsquare.com.
You are listening to The Public Square. I'm Alan C. Duncan, producer of the program, joined by Dave Zanotti, Rob Walgate, and Melanie Elsey. We're talking about the No Kings protest that took place across the country and this 3.5 principle that we're reading about on their website. Where'd that come from? We're trying to find out.
Melanie, this 3.5% principle thing is starting to bug you. But don't you know what that's chapter and verse? That's almost sounds like is that in the Bible? Or I mean, where Constitution, Declaration, Bill of Rights, Northwest Ordinance,
or just in the shadows of their own mind. There is no document that has a 3.5% principle unless they've written their own. And it could be in their own founding documents. It could be their own principle. There's not a universal principle.
It kind of has a Saul Alinsky bell-ringing sort of nature to it. But
I'm more intrigued by the core principles of staying in the fight and taking concrete action, because when you talk about a fight, you're not talking about peaceful protest. And when you're talking about concrete action, you could be talking about taking a hatchet to a curb,
or just walking concrete
breaking up
streets.
breaking up the concrete and throwing it at the cops. That's concrete action. I'm not saying that that's their code word, but it just seems so interesting to me that they're so disingenuous in what they describe. And then they say, well, all we want is peaceful protest. We are committed to nonviolent action. Congressman Raskin is out there saying that that the ICE agents and those who are enforcing the immigration laws are arresting people without warrants. That's a lie. I mean, when you get up and stand at a podium,
the paperwork's already done, or they wouldn't know who they were looking for in the first place. Right.
They have warrants.
Right.
So when you get up at a podium in Philadelphia, which he did, and you have a large crowd of people who are on the edge of their seat to hear what you have to say, and you're saying they're arresting people without warrants. They brutally injured 140 police officers on J6. That's new news to me. I never heard that. Which 140 police officers were brutally wounded on J6? That didn't happen. The illegal $400 jet bribe from Qatar, that transaction initiated in the Biden administration. So anything the things that they are accusing an administration of, whether it's this administration or the next, they're not going to stop when Trump's out of office. It's going to be lodged at the next administration as well.
For those of you following along, we are at the nokings.com website. We're doing this as an open classroom together. We're looking at the words of the folks that have been in the streets, their organizers, the 290, did you say?
209.
209 organizations now affiliated and on the site. And we're just basically saying, what is this? What is this?
Well, in one of the arguments they've used in years past, but obviously it's disappeared now, is the fact of how they want to go and make everything a popular vote. And the fact that Donald Trump did win the popular vote nationwide has taken one of their main talking points away, because you don't hear them reference that. And if you were in a true democracy, that would be one of the things is, hey, the president would be elected by a popular vote. I'm not advocating for that. I like the Electoral College. I think the founders were very intelligent in their foresight to understand the need for it, especially dealing with the number of states and differences around the country. And at that time, they were looking towards the future, not only the 13 that they had.
I think we have to see this in kind of a if we could, just a political cartoon kind of image. In essence, America is a constitutional republic, and that history is there, and it's still in writing. It's still hanging on the wall. The original documents still belong to we the people. But in essence, that structure of a constitutional republic is being battered down, and the ram that's being used against it to batter it down is the word democracy.
Mm-hmm.
But the word democracy has no credence, no standing in the founding, except as something that the founders did not want. because they knew that if you simply tried to govern based upon the statistical polling, by the way, they understood polls in the founding era.
Mm-hmm.
If you simply took a majority vote or opinion poll on anything, it could change from day to day to day. And how could you ever justly govern in the midst of the passions of a mob? Now, they had good evidence from that throughout history in the failed attempts at democracy in the ancient world, but they also lived through the French Revolution, which in essence sort of seems like where nokings.com takes us. To the idea, which, oh, by the way, no kings, that was a really strong theme of the French Revolution. Right after no kings were no prelates, no religious leaders, no people of authority. In fact, it seems like no kings, to be a right logo, to be representative, would probably be smarter to just change their logo to a guillotine.
Well, that was one of the posters that a state representative from a certain state was taking video of people, and guillotine was in one of those posters, and she's had to apologize. I mean, she put it up, but now she's apologized about it, the imagery being there. But yeah, the guillotine was used.
The history is off with their heads. In other words, when you start challenging authority based upon the public opinion of 3.5% of the people and attempting to leverage the collapse of a civil government, you're walking right in the path of the French Revolution. We've seen all this before. Clearly, no kings is basically counting on no one knowing their history.
And I think that's why they're using the language no kings, because they know to make a difference, they're going to have to get that 3.5% from the middle. They're not changing anyone's mind that's in that progressive movement, that's in that far left. They're with them regardless. So
but the 3.5% that they're talking about is they need 3.5% of the population to become militant with them, right? And to create
action.
so much
Yes.
chaos. I see.
To take action.
Yep.
So you guys aren't buying. They've got the disclaimer. A core principle behind all No Kings events is a commitment to nonviolent action. Are you guys not buying that, or you think it's going to spiral out of control?
I think that is a statement on paper that does not match their actions, does not match their words spoken at rallies.
This group specifically?
This group specifically. If you watch the video that's posted on the No Kings website and you watch it all the way through, they are ginning up the crowd to get angry and there's a human response when you think things are being taken from you, stolen from you. If there's a grievance of illegitimate action against you or your family or your neighbor, you're going to want to get engaged personally and physically.
Well, and this is something that the left would say happens on the right a lot. That the right also tries to gin up enthusiasm that certain things are being taken from them as well.
There is not one word spoken on that video that says, please go out and protest peacefully.
Which video are you talking about?
On their website. They don't say, they talk about their grievances, but they don't instruct anyone to go out and protest peacefully.
Well, I'm saying on their website.
On their website, there is a disclaimer.
There's a disclaimer. That's exactly what it is a disclaimer. It's not.
Well, maybe we're calling it a disclaimer. There's a statement that they're saying.
That's why it's a printed statement that doesn't match their behavior.
But here's the trick in that question. It's a fair question, but it's a trick question because whether it moves to violence or not, they are not advocating for the consent of the governed as spoken of in the Declaration and carried out in the process of forming a constitutional government which required majorities and then state ratification. The words start off, we the people, not we 3.5% of the people that have bullied the rest of you into such a fearful position that now we're taking control because you know the current system doesn't work. There is an antithesis in that language to consent, even though they're trying to make it sound like consent. They're just basically bullying people.
They are bullying people, and one of the things that frustrates me is when I look at some of those 209 organizations and they claim to be against authoritarianism, I think about to the COVID years, and those were the people that were pushing for lockdowns. Those are the people who were pushing for pro-vaccine for everyone.
All right. That's we got to go to break. We got to come right back on that.
I want to go on that too, but yes, you're right. We do have to take a break. So everybody stay where you are. We'll be right back for more after these messages. Stay with us.
We will be right back for more on the Public Square.
Have you listened to the Kids on the Square episode, Dearest Friend, featuring John and Abigail Adams? Join us for discoveries.
My point exactly. So let me do you a favor and let you know that while your stabbing wit is a strength, it is a weapon that should be saved for other evenings.
I am sure I don't know what you mean. Father has always told us to speak only kindly.
Adventures.
Whoa!
Oh, you are right.
Yes, I'm fine. But I beg your pardon. I didn't know anyone else was here.
That's quite all right.
And laughs.
We're about to get a history lesson from my very nerdy and nosy uncle.
Fine. I guess you can wait in this drive-through line, listen to my 80s classic rock, and not hear about the greatest colonial love story ever told.
Not the 80s rock playlist.
You know, I'm feeling a little more a cappella today. Oh, we're halfway there.
Fine. Tell us about the Adams.
Kids on the Square aims to bless, encourage, and educate the next generation of American children. So what are you waiting for? Grab a friend, share this episode with your family, and join us today at Kids on the Square.
Spreading the light of liberty across the land. Now back to the Public Square.
Back around the table at the Public Square. We're picking up right where we left off after the last break.
Okay, Rob, you got to finish that thought. Where were no kings when all of us were laying down our time, energy, in essence, to fight the dictatorial authoritarianism that was manifested in COVID across all 50 states, across so many governors, and certainly from the United States government and the United States bureaucracy. Where were no kings then?
Well, it seems like they were okay with the authoritarians when they agreed with them. It's okay when the people that are in office are making decisions that they agree with.
And
from shutting down schools. I mean, look, you have the American Federation of Teachers on there, I believe, that were okay with shutting down schools in all of these states.
Demanding it.
And now we look at test scores from 5 years later, and we see how much we harmed young people by having those measures.
Because again, this is a republic versus a bureaucracy. That was all bureaucracy. It was just people, I'm just doing my job. Oh, I'm arresting a mom, I'm tasing her at a football game because I'm just doing my job.
Well,
and so I got to do a Chesterton quote here. I'm sorry. Rob was quoting Chesterton before I was today. So let the record show. Chesterton in Heretics says that the modern world is full of men who hold the key positions in society, not because they are great, but because they are good at filling in forms and obeying rules. Bureaucracy is the triumph of the clerk over the creator. And that's what we saw during COVID. And that's what these people, I don't know if they know they're fighting for, but they are fighting for the churning wheels of status quo bureaucracy.
The triumph of the clerk over the creator.
Just punch the time clock. Just fill out the form.
Their website describes the attacking of civil rights. The civil rights were attacked during COVID when businesses were closed down. I lost a friend to suicide because they lost their business. You know, there was no due process. Everyone's
Health
screaming due process
governors
now.
Picking winners and losers.
Right.
Governors in conservative red states tracking the people's travel over the weekends because they came to believe through the bureaucracy that the people were the virus. That in your emotion, you became the virus.
I think it was the city of Raleigh, and now I'm going to have to look it up, but that their police department tweeted out something like someone had a protest plan about COVID. And protests are not on the list of the governor's approved activities. And I'm like, this is what we mean.
So civil rights were lost when bureaucracies got out of control during the whole COVID era. Worse, there are businesses who still haven't recouped from that. What they're describing as the loss of civil rights are a perceived civil right for someone who's not lawfully here. So they're not putting anything in the correct context in their own descriptions on their website.
Let's be clear about that. What's currently happening in regards to immigration enforcement is not based upon executive order. It is based upon constitutionally passed laws from the United States Congress. Donald Trump is not utilizing any more laws than Barack Obama utilized.
And Barack Obama deported millions under his tenure over the whole 8-year span.
Far more than Donald Trump is on track to doing.
That is correct.
Now, the executive branch is responsible for overseeing that part of the administration of the state and to getting the job done. But let's get Barack Obama deported millions of people who were here illegally, far more than Donald Trump at this stage in the game is on track to do the same.
And he did it under the same auspices as what the Trump administration is doing when you have...
So is this no kings but Obama?
Lawful deportation orders, when you have... There is due process through the immigration courts, but once those judges issue warrants and deportation orders, it's game over. There have been executive orders issued by Donald Trump on immigration, but all of them are within the confines of executing, executive order. They're executing the laws that are on the books passed by Congress. So we're not saying there are no executive orders that have been issued, but the executive orders are on track with law enforcement of the laws that are already on the books. He's not creating new laws.
Another part of their website, and this is under kind of the headline, Indivisible. It says, stop the cuts. Congress is threatening to gut funding for essential programs like Medicaid, SNAP, education, and climate. Use Indivisible's tools to demand your member of Congress stop the cuts. Take action now. And if you click on that, it takes you to the Indivisible website.
And how slick is that, by the way? They've got about a half a dozen different action items, and they encourage you to go to their coalition or their participating members to work through their plan to influence Congress on that sort of stuff. Look, you won't find any word in here about the immorality of an unfunded national debt that can't be paid back, so that anything that's a cut would have to be equally immoral. What else are they going to cut? The only thing that seems to be moral to no kings is to raise more taxes. Well, that has a funny ring to it. They don't have the courage to say that out loud, because isn't that what started the whole concern about starting a country in the first place?
That was one of the grievances listed in the Declaration, yes.
So if they have their democracy and they become the kings, the first thing they're going to do is to jack taxes up on everybody to give more stuff away that we can't afford to pay for anyways.
Right. So when they're talking about defunding programs, they're really talking about slashing waste or fraud.
So when we get into this level of the classroom, we always long for our ranking professor, literally, among our trustees, Dr. William B. Allen, one of America's most preeminent political philosophers and historians and experts on a whole number of subjects, including Harriet Beecher Stowe, including George Washington. So we included Dr. Allen in on the memo, and he sent us back a note, which I'm sure he'll be glad that we're reading on air. This is an excerpt from the note.
Yes. I'm sorry that my voice is not going to do this due justice to his voice, but I'll do my best. Dr. Allen said, quote, "Remember, government by protest is the meat and potatoes of ideological political party formations. That was the legacy of the French Revolution, and it has reappeared in every emulation of that disastrous event ever since. The appropriate counter is constitutionalism and programmatic political party formations. The answer to no kings is self-government and not collective angst. Since self-government requires responsibility for political developments, we the people, excuses for the irresponsibility are incompatible with the requirements of self-government."
Oh, may I just do the slightest interpretation, we can't fix these problems without grown-ups acting like grown-ups.
Mm-hmm.
You may start with protest, but responsible behavior, and what he would speak about programmatic political parties, is you have an agenda and you organize to fix the problems and you sell the solution based on the consent of the governed. You don't protest to throw out the whole system if, in fact, the system is built on self-government in the first place.
Thank you, Dave. Now, some stations might have to cut away, and if that's your station, you can hear the rest of this program at thepublicsquare.com or on the Public Square mobile app. There's also a version of this on YouTube as well. Spotify, iHeart, Apple Podcasts, pretty much all the places you can find audio programming. For everybody else, we'll be right back after a short break. Please stay with us. We're heading into the final few minutes today on the Public Square. And Dave, I'm still thinking about the note that Dr. Allen sent in to us. It's making me think of other protests that maybe folks more on the conservative side of things might look upon fondly. What would we say if someone maybe from a No Kings protest walked in here and said, what about the Boston Tea Party as protest? What about the modern Tea Party movement as protest, even January 6th as protest, not as insurrection.
What about the civil rights movement?
But as protest, civil rights movement.
What about the temperance movement?
Yeah.
What about the abolition movement? Right? All of these
we're
things.
Just exercising our right to protest.
So this
something
is
we
where
don't like.
Dr. Allen is basically saying protest is a part if it then turns into a programmatic, well understood and developed, and he uses the term party, in essence, an agenda that has moved into the system, but it's built upon responsible behavior in regards to the goal of self-government. In other words, you can't go for chaos to tear everything down and give it into the hands of what? Democracy. Well, here's what we've got to say. Fine. It's a good question. I think the best question to ask, without prejudice, without angst or anger, because these people have the right to do what they're doing, and they have the right to be wrong if they're wrong. And we have the right to try to discern that. And we're doing it right from their own words. So let's just ask this question for No Kings, all of their 209 affiliated organizations, and the Billionaires Club that is funding them. What is democracy? You want a democracy. Okay, what does that look like? Here's the pen. You clearly don't want the Declaration of Independence. You clearly don't want the Constitution. You don't want a republic. You want something else. Here's a pen. Show us the government you want and let us evaluate if that's one that the majority of us want. Let's work upon the consent of the governed, not the leverage pressure to chaos that will frighten people and bully them into a situation of believing that it's all coming to an end and we have to give you the power because you have the answer. But you know what? You don't have an answer. You just want what you want. You want it now and you want somebody else to pay for it.
On their website, their next steps are sustained strategic protests. They don't have next steps.
Which would be the complete difference from programmatic self-government based on responsibility.
Right. They don't want to outline, as you have described, what they believe would be best for the country. They just want to tear down what we have.
Mm-hmm. Now, Boston Tea Party, always been controversial. Still controversial among people who say, what right did you have to destroy someone else's property? And you know what? That was an illegal action.
Well, it's interesting. George Washington, in Dr. Allen's collection of George Washington's letters, Washington says, our cause, we stand with Boston. Their cause is just, and then it's parenthetical. He goes, not that we affirm the destruction of the property.
Yeah.
You know, Washington himself says that. Their cause was
what
just.
the Sons of Liberty should have done is then sent a check.
Yeah,
right. Well, our goal was to make a point. Sorry for the inconvenience, but you understand we're not putting up with this anymore, and you're not unloading that stuff on this land. Now, okay, that we are now in the zone of an argument that is leading to a war. The war would then not just be a war to tear down or defeat the other guys. The war would be for independence to start over and do it the right way. Now, you could debate the morality of using a criminal action. And you know what? If you break the law, you got a problem. You've got a problem.
And again, the point that they were trying to make was a truthful point. So we talk about their rights to protest. They have the right to be deceptive. But we have the responsibility to see through the deception, to understand what is the difference between fact and fiction in terms of what they're describing.
Well, their next steps are do more, do more, do more, do more.
Right.
And it matches up very clearly with the progressive socialist party movements that are going on across the country. All right.
And
by the way, Bernie Sanders' organization is a part of their 209.
Yeah, I noticed that the Bernie logo is on there.
Bernie himself got eaten up by the Democrat bureaucracy. It was odd to see his name pop up on that list.
Yeah, well, they will eat their own for a cause. That's for sure.
As will the conservatives.
Oh, as will the conservatives.
I can show you a few scars.
And I mean, you think about it. Them talking about no kings. They're talking about, obviously, they're making reference to Donald Trump. Donald Trump, is a controversial figure. I mean, let's make no mistake about it. If he said the month is June,
easy target for these guys.
I mean, if he said the month is June, there's some of them that aren't going to agree with that because of the fact they don't want to agree with anything that he says.
But they are counting on American citizens not having the mental capacity, the acumen, the soulful ability to discern from things that differ. They are counting on us believing their definition of terms, accepting their declaration of danger, and buying in and being bullied into this process, advocating for something that they cannot even define. Now, again, if you have friends, neighbors, relatives are involved, and we're not suggesting you get involved with any conversation that you don't feel led by God to get involved in. And so that this is not go win your neighbor. When someone is confronting you on this, there's a simple answer. Ask them a question. Please define democracy. What is it that you want? Hand them a pen and say, could you write it down? Because I kind of thought we already had about as much democracy as ever has happened in the world before with liberty under law. You're unhappy. What would you change? And when they go into all these different policies, say, well, wait a minute, these policies were all created based upon the consent of the governed in a representative republic. Why don't you just win an election and go ahead and actually, oh, by the way, oops, maybe that's what this is all about anyhow. This is really just the 2026 campaign and the 2028 campaign. The difference is they want to change the whole conversation about the Declaration, about the Constitution, and about the Republic. And maybe what they really want to do is to upend the 250th celebration of the Declaration of Independence, because that document is so dangerous to their cause.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting, too, is one of their speakers specifically said that freedom means no deportations. Now, when you're moving into the next...
If you want to win that in Congress, go for it.
Yeah, change the law. Change the law.
If you don't have deportations of individuals who aren't supposed to be here, at the same time, states are relaxing their election requirements. When you go into the 26 and 28 elections, you're going to have folks who are participating who are not citizens. So for them, freedom means no deportations. It's okay if you close the border. We'll be okay with the 11 million that walked in over the last few years.
We're just out of time, and we've got to get one other important what do we do about this is one, keep researching. Please stay with us on the Public Square. Stay with us on YouTube with the TPS Express program. Stay with us in regards to Kids on the Square. Keep looking for more information because we're putting it out. If you're not on our monthly update, please do that. But in addition to staying connected, there are 3 simple words that we have found in 45 years of research and study that from a biblical point of view, you can do when you're confronted with something that's evil. The first is the Bible teaches us to expose it. We're trying to do that conversation today, to go to their site, go to their words, and understand them. So you expose something that appears to be evil. Secondly, you resist it. In other words, you don't just go along. 3.5% is not enough to bully the thinking people of America, and to call it a principle is embarrassing. So you expose evil, you resist evil, you don't go along. And then thirdly, we have to overcome it by doing good. My suggestion is this. Rather than curse the darkness, let's light some candles. I want to encourage everyone to embrace what we are doing and others are doing to celebrate the Declaration of Independence, starting right now. If you don't have a copy today of the Declaration of the Constitution, if you'll visit us online or call us today at 1-800-522-VOTE, we'll send you one. Read it for yourself and then join us in the process of redeclaring the basis of a constitutional republic.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks, Rob and Melanie. That's all the time we have today for The Public Square. Very thought-provoking conversation. If you'd like to hear it again, visit us at thepublicsquare.com, the Public Square mobile app, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeart, wherever you like to listen. We'd like to thank the stations for airing this program, and we would like to thank you for listening. We'll see you next time on The Public Square.
The Public Square is a broadcast service of the American Policy Roundtable.